What to do if you have debt troubles, Part 2. Brought to you by Kenneth Javert at yourlegallegup.com. Your advantage if you're being sued or harassed by debt collectors. Hi again, everybody. You may remember that in our last video we touched on a couple of pretty amazing things. Debt litigation is upside down. We discussed the fact that debt collectors win about 85% of their cases because people don't fight back. But if people would fight back, they would win 85% of the cases, and the debt collectors would lose those. That's crazy. It reminded us of lion tamers who stuck their heads into lions' mouths in the old days. How do the debt collectors train their victims not to fight back? Today we're going to go briefly through the reasons the debt collectors couldn't win very many cases if people would fight back. And then we're going to start dissecting the collection process to show you how the debt collectors use it to train you, and also to show you all the chances it gives you to improve your situation. Bear with me if you've seen this before, because even if you already know what I'm about to tell you, it's something you need to keep in your mind. We're going to go through this part very quickly. Remember that I told you there was over $10 trillion of nominal debt. That means that's how much people theoretically owe out there, that American consumers owe. Over 10% of that debt is stressed, meaning that people are making payments late or not at all, and maybe half of that is in default. Although you can't get true statistics on this because they aren't kept by any single trustworthy entity. For our purposes, just be aware that every year hundreds of millions, billions of dollars of nominal debt come down the conveyor belt into the sweatshops of the debt collectors. That is a lot of debt and accounts. Remember that debt collectors are people or companies who routinely collect debt originally owed to someone else. For us, this means that we're usually talking about junk debt buyers, companies that buy debt already in default for the purposes of forcing distressed consumers to pay. Vulture capitalists in the truest sense of the word. I'm not saying that junk debt buyers, like vultures or skunks, don't have their place in the animal kingdom, but that doesn't mean there isn't a distinct odor characteristic of the industry. They stink. And no one really wants to see them circling overhead, right? You've heard of mortgage-backed securities, right? Many old debts were handled in the same way, with supposed rights to payments being packaged up with each other by the banks and sold to a bunch of suckers. Most of these debts may simply not be legally collectible at all. But lots of other debts aren't packaged in this way, but instead are sold in quantity to junk debt buyers for pennies on the dollar. That's still good news for you if they're after you. Junk debt buyers often buy many millions of dollars of nominal debt at a time. When they buy them, they don't buy the paperwork that would be needed to prove them. If they did that, the cost of the documentation would dwarf the cost of buying the debt itself. So buying the debt this way makes good economic sense for the debt collectors. Can they get the documentation if they need it to prove their case against you? Very doubtful. Many debt-selling businesses lose the records along the way, or else they outright destroy them. Remember that they're selling for pennies on the dollar. They don't want to have to spend more time and money trying to help someone else collect the debt. That's spending good money or sending good money after bad. They don't want to do that. The debt collectors pretend they have the records. If you defend yourself and start asking for them, you're likely to get the response that there's an ongoing investigation, and they'll give them to you when and if they find anything. I seriously doubt that they're ever doing any searching at all. In many cases, they either can't get the evidence under any circumstances, or it's too expensive for them to bother. They know that, and so they really don't search for it. Remember that this business model makes good sense. You buy huge quantities of debt and file suit. Most people default, but when others fight back, you bluff. Eventually, if they keep fighting, you just drop the lawsuit. They make a lot of money on this model. Imagine filing lawsuits that you could only win 10% of the time, but winning 90% of the time because the people you're suing don't defend themselves. You'd make a mint. That's the way the debt collection industry is. Very wisely and efficiently from a business standpoint, they are designed to go after the weakest targets, the people who don't fight back, just like vultures. And like I said, they do have their place in nature. But you don't have to be their next meal. It's their efficiency that gives you your chance. If you fight back enough to let them know that you won't be a pushover, they will almost certainly eventually leave you alone. They really have nothing to prove for the most part. It's just a business. Make it unprofitable and they look elsewhere. The question is, how do you let them know that you will not be a pushover? Or better yet, how do you plant signals in your file along the way that send that message? We'll get to those questions as we look at the way the debt industry is designed in our next video. Meanwhile, take a look at the attached report. Got debt. Protect what's yours and don't let the debt collectors rip you off.